Broadcasting from the Any Hour Services podcast studios, I'm your host, Mike Wilson, and on this episode of In the House, we're going to be talking about whole house repipes. Let's go. In the House is a podcast about the major systems in the house: electrical, plumbing, heating, and air conditioning. Each week, I'm joined by a panel of experts. We pick a topic and we discuss it in depth. It's meant to be informative and hopefully bring you some value. I've got Dwayne, Scott, and Ricky with us today. They're the managers over the plumbing department at Any Hour Services. Real quick, where do you guys come out on the great toilet paper debate? Over or under?
Over.
Coming over the top?
Yes.
Anyone else? You're plumbers. Plumbers should have an opinion on this.
I say use it for sure. Is that part of it?
No.
I
never thought that there was. I've never heard anyone like try and debate use toilet paper or don't.
Bidet, my friend.
Yeah, but even with a bidet, you got to dry off. Let me be more specific with my question. When you put toilet paper on the roll, do you make it so that it rolls off the top or rolls off the back?
All right. So I've been married 40 years, and it's still a raging debate in our home.
Okay.
So I'm an over.
You're an over.
And my wife is always under. And the reason being, because we had 6 kids, and when they were little, if it's over, all they do is go in and fan it all down, and it gets a big, huge pile on the floor.
Sounds like a training opportunity.
But when it's under, they can sit there and roll the toilet paper, and it just sits there and goes round and round and round.
Okay.
Unless they rolled it backwards.
Well, but they don't do that. The 2-year-old, the terrible twos, don't do that.
Okay. Well, that is good logic. Scott, you still have not weighed in here. Are you an over or under?
Okay, yeah, you're going to have to cut this part because I completely misunderstood what you were thinking. I was thinking your wiping method and not at all what you're talking about. That's got to be cut out of there.
That's front to back or back to front.
Over and under. I mean,
no,
okay,
that's something totally different.
I've never considered how to put it on the roller.
You're
not at all.
You're an I don't care.
I don't care. It does not matter to me as long as there's some there.
As long as there's some there. That makes a lot of sense. Now, Dwayne, are you of that, like you say that you like it over, but are you are you to the point where you sit down and if it's like backwards, you change it?
Well, not right now because our daughter moved in with the terrible twos, and so I'm leaving it.
You're leaving it the way that it is. So you don't care.
Well, I've changed it a lot.
Gotcha. Because I don't care about no kids. I'm fixing the toilet paper to be the right way.
And which way?
Over.
I prefer the over.
It's the way that it's supposed to be. If you look at the original patent for the toilet paper roll, it goes over. And I know that doesn't necessarily prove anything, but like that makes the most sense.
You actually researched that?
Well, it's an observation that I made. I observe things, Dwayne. Do you not?
What's our topic today?
Top toilet paper.
Okay.
Whole house toilet paper. If you toilet paper a whole house, how many rolls? All right, fine. All right.
You went there.
I guess Ricky will. Are you an I don't care, or are you it has to go over the toilet paper roll?
What's my look? So you could ask me twice. I already answered the question. Didn't I answer?
You did, but then I asked how intense you are with
has to be over.
Has to be. So you didn't say has to be. You just said over.
And the wife is the same.
Good.
Ooh.
Was that a prerequisite? Is that something you discussed? We talk about the things that you should discuss before someone gets married. My kid's like, you know, what should we talk about? Would that have been a deal breaker?
No.
Okay.
It's been pretty heated in our home.
Really?
Yeah,
Whoa.
really.
I guess you could install 2 toilet paper rolls
His
next
and
to
hers.
each other.
Wow.
Yeah.
But they make doubles.
I like that.
I've only seen those in commercial applications.
Well, you can put a commercial application in your bathroom.
I am not disagreeing with you, Ricky. So our episode today is...
Did you get your sink fixed yet? Replaced?
I didn't replace the sink, but I did replace...
Mic to your mouth, Ricky, please. Thank you, sir.
I don't know, but like I don't know if in my... No, not closer to Mike. MIC.
I did that on purpose.
I make a lot of dad jokes. I promise people we'll get to the topic, but they're distracting me. And Austin, just as a side note, I don't know, but like I sound really loud in my headphones, and so I don't know if my gain's up like super hot. So if I'm like, I am hot, but I don't know if you guys are like. Okay, so the plumbers are waiting for us to start the show. I know we said we'd be talking about whole house repipes today, so we'll just kind of dive right into that topic. Now, whole house repipes, that sounds like a major renovation, and to me, major renovations sound expensive. And I'm assuming that there have got to be other people that think major renovations sound expensive. Like, I mean, is a whole house repipe a major renovation, and is it expensive?
I would agree with that. I think it's an investment. Anytime that you're upgrading your system and bringing it up to date or up to standards, it's going to be an investment. And when we talk about a plumbing repipe, most of your plumbing is not visible. You know, we see our toilets and our sinks and stuff, but everything that makes that work is usually behind walls and behind sheetrock and things like that. So it's definitely something that's gonna be a cost. Definitely.
I think that's one of the things that like would scare me the most is the fact that like most of the plumbing is like hidden behind the walls, and in order to like repipe it, it sounds like, oh, I got to take off the sheetrock. That sounds messy. I don't do sheetrock if I got to find some. Like, it just sounds like a big undertaking. So, you know, when it comes to repiping in your house, is that something that you should do proactively or wait until something goes wrong and a plumber says, hey, you need to repipe it?
Well, I think that one you kind of look at, everybody wants to know, well, how long can I go? How long does it go? In the commercial field, schools, hospitals, churches typically do total renovations every 30 to 40 years. I mean, like strip the building down inside, reframe walls, upgrade the electrical, upgrade the piping and everything else. And so I think we can take from that's probably a pretty good time frame that plumbing's probably designed to last, 30 to 40 years on whatever type of plumbing it is, whether it was galvanized or copper. Now PEX hasn't been out. Well, it's been out 40 years now too.
Now, would you say that a commercial plumbing system is being used a whole lot more, and so, or does the stuff just last 40 years, or does it last depending on how much it's used?
Well, I don't know. Galvanized pipe, 30 to 40 years was kind of the lifespan of it. And, we came in from our outhouses in the 30s, kind of a thing. And at that point, that's what we had was galvanized pipe for the water. And they brought that in the homes once we got rid of the outhouses in the 30s and 40s. The galvanized was still used up clear until into the 70s. And then it changed to copper in the late 70s and through the 80s and 90s and still, and then the PEX came about in the 90s and things. So there's been different products of water piping that comes out. Ricky, you want to talk about the waste piping too? Or?
Well, galvanized piping, obviously, back a little before my era and during, it just builds up. It was all we had at that point, and that's what they originated and designed and passed for code, and it was installed. But at this day and age, when those homes have that galvanized drainage and water lines, it's probably half the size of what the original pipe was as the years go through.
Because galvanized pipe like corrodes and you get a bunch of buildup inside, so it like decreases. So if you're experiencing decreased water pressure, different things like that, that might be a sign that your old galvanized pipes are
correct.
Need to be.
Right.
Do you come across a lot of people that do that proactively, or do most people wait until it's like, you got to repipe?
Yeah, usually we see it's more of a need than a plan. Now, there are people, though, that, they just buy a home, they know it's older, and they will invest in that just knowing that they don't want to tear into it again. So that's another factor, is if you're into an area of your home that you're remodeling, even if it's one small portion, maybe it makes sense to get into a whole house repipe.
So is it do I need to be concerned based off of the age or based off of the material that my home was plumbed with?
Both.
Yeah, I was going to say both too.
Yeah.
Okay.
But definitely consider the material, because each material is going to react differently. You know, when we're talking about the galvanized and the older metal materials, they are going to wear out from inside out because the minerals in the water break it down. Whereas plastics aren't going to do quite the same thing. You're not going to see near the type of buildup that you would in a galvanized system as you would in like a copper system.
And the
It's
same
different.
thing applies with our drainage piping. The older cast iron piping and stuff it builds up from the inside out as well. And then above that, it was cast iron and then galvanized for the venting is what they did back in the old days. And so it just wears out too. I mean, both from the inside, the outside. Underground, you've got soil conditions that affect it from the outside and inside as well. So galvanized isn't going to last as long outside in the ground because it gets attacked from both inside and outside.
So 30, 40 years, we're talking about homes that were built in the 80s, in the 80s to 1990-ish. What are the signs that people, how does someone know if they need a repipe without necessarily like getting to the point that something breaks and you have a plumber come out and be like, oh, well, your issue is we need to like replace all of these lines inside the house? What are some warning signs?
I think one of the first signs, talking about your water lines, if you're seeing discoloration in your water, if it's coming out orange, that's a good sign that rust is moving through there. If you're also experiencing not great flow, you're going to see pressures different than water flow. So you might have this amazing water pressure, but it's just not coming out at a good volume. Pressure and volumes, they're two different things. So discoloration in your water, if you're able to see the water lines or the piping, if you're seeing white and pitting, rust around it, things like that, definitely it's something to consider based off of visual if you can see those pipes.
So in your equipment room or where your water heater is, if you can see any exposed pipes, look at those. Do they look like they've seen better days?
Yeah.
They look like they're about to fall apart, because that's the pipes that are running through the rest of the house.
Exactly.
And chances are it looks like that behind the walls as well. Go back to, you said something interesting, water pressure versus water flow. I'm a little slow and I'm trying to wrap my head around like what that looks like. So you said you could have good water pressure, but not good flow. Talk me through that, because I'm dense. I'm confused.
Okay, so take a straw for example. Great example. We were talking about your straw earlier. There,
It's metal.
Metal
Save
straw.
the turtles.
You know, you can have a very large straw or a very small straw,
Yes.
and the amount of water coming through that straw is going to be much different. But how much you're sucking on that is the same pressure that you're pulling it through. Does that make sense? So if you have a bigger opening in your pipe, you are getting a larger distribution.
You're getting more water.
You're getting more water. Whereas if it's smaller, you're not getting near as much flow.
But if you have the same pressure and a smaller opening, wouldn't that like make it shoot out faster?
Not necessarily.
No?
Not
'Cause
necessarily.
I'm thinking about like the water hose. You know, when you got a certain amount of water coming from the hose, you've got the different things on the nozzle, or if you put your thumb over the opening, the smaller you make that, like it shoots further and you get more pressure. It feels like more pressure because it's like a jet stream coming out. But then when you open it, it's just like,
Yeah, so you're decreasing the pressure right at the end, but what's coming through that hose is the same pressure. The distribution pressure is the exact same. You're restricting it right at the tip of the hose,
Gotcha.
which makes it shoot further. But you're and like when you're doing that with your hose, it's pushing further. But how's the stream? Is it larger or smaller?
it's smaller.
It's smaller, so you're decreasing, but your pressure in the water coming to it's no different.
Gotcha. And by gotcha, I mean, I don't think I'm going to like get it. So I was just trying to, because we started out by talking about what are some things that people, will recognize as a sign. And I was trying to figure out how to communicate that to them. And I I failed there.
Well, and that's hard too, because most of the older systems aren't regulated, so they're used to very high pressure. You know what I mean? You'll get in that shower, and they've got the thumb over the hose, so it's coming out pretty hard.
Gotcha.
It's not regulated, but their flows could be very much restricted.
Again, I'm just trying as a homeowner, and I apologize for those listening that like get it and they're like, Mike, you're dumb. Like, move on. But like, I'm trying to like figure it out. Again, so a symptom that somebody might experience: more water or less water at the fixture. Less water.
Less water.
Okay, I think most people would interpret that as lower water pressure. But you're saying
Yes.
It's not lower water pressure. It's just less water because there's a smaller opening. Okay, I get it now. There's less volume coming,
Less
but it's
volume.
arriving at the same pressure. But visually and experiencing at the faucet, it feels like less pressure.
And that's probably the best way to think of it when we're talking about recognizing when your system needs to be updated. That's really what you should be looking for anyways, your flow, not so much being concerned about your water pressure, because that's a whole different animal.
But I think but that's a good thing though, because we talk about water pressure, and if that's something that someone thinks like, oh, I've just got low water pressure, but then they test the pressure of the water coming in and the gauge says, no, you're good, you got 75 pounds, like then the next step is like, well, what's causing the restriction of the water getting to where I use it? And that could be an indication of pipe constriction, build up. Okay. Whew, man, sorry for those listening that totally got that. All right, so as far as like those, any other signs? So you said rust-colored water. We're gonna say low water pressure because I think that's just what people will interpret that as. You said visual signs. If you can see some exposed pipes, any other obvious signs that like, maybe I need to repipe this thing. Now we've been talking about supply, but there's also the drainage side of things, right? Is that just backups that like, oh, maybe I need to redo the drains in the house?
On your subgrade, when you have the
Subgrade.
underneath concrete,
Okay.
Down below the earth line.
Subgrade. Got it.
I
was thinking of my report card.
On your
subgrades.
vertical lines, you get the fall doesn't get as much buildup, but when you have your horizontal lines that run out to the street, you can get rid of your drainage and things like that. Whenever you have areas, it sits and it builds up over the years, and that's where you'll get your slow drainage and your vertical. Once you get your vertical fall and hits horizontal, you'll get some backups there, and that comes to jackhammering up concrete and pulling out the lines, and if they're galvanized, I've had them to where there was no line left of metal pipe. It was just earth.
Yeah, you see like a channel cut out of them where the water goes.
Correct, where drainage goes. Yep.
Or drainage.
Yep.
Sometimes the drainage is water. Sometimes there's hitchhikers. No. Okay, I thought it was appropriate. It was a very nice way. Okay, let's see. We talked about the signs there. Talk to me about like what it entails. Like if you're going to be repiping the house, how big of a project is that? And like what are the steps? Has it changed over the years? Is it easier to do now? Is it harder or just as hard? So walk me through. Okay, cool. Somebody's told me and I'm convinced that I need to repipe my house. What does that process look like?
I can open up with a little bit on that, Mike. So when the technician comes out and you've diagnosed and realized that you got pipes that are restricted in drainage or water, you come up with I, as a technician, always did a drawing to help the customer understand what is inside the walls and diagrams and things like that. One of the keys to doing a proper repipe for water, we'll use water first, is making sure that you know where everything is going from your mechanical room to all your fixtures and how to get to what's existing, get it out, and get the new PEX lines in, which is flexible. And you have a lot more opportunities nowadays with PEX to get to all your fixtures necessary throughout the house. You will have to cut your drywall in certain areas like that, and then get to the back of the valves in your showers and things like that. It's key that you get the pipe all the way to the valves, not short of the valves, taking shortcuts.
Are there some people that are like, that's a hard part to get to. I think I'm just gonna splice it here where I can get to it.
There have been a few times in my career that I've gotten to crawl spaces and things like that, or done some demolition and see that it was hard to get to, and people took some shortcuts. And of course, all I did was try to bring the customer along and let them know that you have a 4-foot piece of galvanized pipe coming from your shower valve down into your crawl space, instead of going all the way up through the wall like a whole house repipe should. When you're helping a customer along to understand what's involved in a repipe, you want to make sure they're aware of where you're going to make your cuts in your drywall to feed the pipes up through, and prepare them for drywall repair, texture, and paint, because that's another added expense above the plumbing's expertise and what we do. So all those things combined is educating the customer on where the pipes are, where you're going to tie them into, and making sure that they're comfortable with everything that you're going to do to get new water lines to all the fixtures throughout the house.
Gotcha. So does PEX make it a little easier since it's kind of flexible and it can go, or is copper pipe easier to do because it's a straight line, like it doesn't bend when you're fishing from a top plate to a bottom plate, or vice versa?
Well, the one thing with copper is we often have to solder, and it's very hard to solder in tight spaces next to wood, in between walls, that kind of a thing. So there's always a flame hazard. They do have crimping tools now, crimpers for the solder, but it takes a little bit of room to be able to make those work.
Right.
So the PEX is kind of as far as the water piping repipes, is the go-to thing now, because it's available and it's flexible. And
does that extra work on the copper make doing a copper job more expensive?
Yes. Yep.
And is copper more expensive than PEX, I would assume?
Yeah.
So there are people that think that, like, oh, well, if I pay more, it's probably a nicer job. So is copper better than PEX?
I'd say different. I wouldn't say better.
That's because you're politically correct.
Yes. Well, because we're using it, we're still using both materials. If you ask me galvanized versus copper, that's a no-brainer. But both materials are still being used. Commercial buildings are still using copper lines, so they're both really good, and they have different benefits and things. So I don't know. It's a hard one to answer.
I'm just trying to think if someone is trying to weigh in their mind, if I'm repiping my house, is it worth the extra expense going copper versus doing PEX? Like, am I going to get 10, 15 more years out of copper versus PEX? Or you get what I'm saying? Like, how do you counsel someone?
Well, I think there's still, PEX has been around since the 90s, late 80s, early 90s. So we've only got 30 years of history with PEX. So we don't know how long it's going to last. We do see pinhole leaks in PEX. We do see pinhole leaks in copper. And so, but copper's been around and being used since the late 60s, actually, all through. So, we've got 60 years of experience with copper. And
is there still 60-year-old copper that's doing just fine?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely.
Copper one, PEX ?
Well, 30 years is a good trial run. It took me as a plumber, it took me about 10 years before I really wanted to switch over to PEX and thinking it's a good product. Sometimes when new products come out, you want to kind of stand back a little bit and
let everybody else be the guinea pig.
Fiberglass,
not my customers.
Fiberglass tub and showers came out in the late 60s and 70s, and they had some issues with it, with the fiberglass. But then they discovered acrylic coatings on the fiberglass tub and showers. That made it a good product. So things that would crack in 10 years now last 30 years.
Were there some things that they found out about the PEX when it first came out? Because there used to be like just white plastic PEX, right? And now that you've got the red and the blue, it's a different, better plastic, or the exact same thing?
The colors of the PEX, if it's PEX, are all the same thing.
Gotcha.
There was a product called polypiping that came out.
That's what I was thinking.
Polyethylene that came out was the first generation of it. And there were some issues with that, whether it was workmanship, fittings, the way they crimped. There were some problems with that. And it kind of set back that introduction a little bit as far as states were concerned and local jurisdictions because of some of the issues and floods and problems that they had. But that's kind of a thing of the past. And
Sure.
as long as workmanship is done right, it's a
Okay,
great
so
product.
there's going to be some drywall patch painting when you're repiping. Go ahead.
I wanted to fall back on just a couple minutes ago. We had talked about the copper versus the PEX.
Yes.
and the costing. And picture yourself with a 3-story home, and you're wanting to get a repipe, and you wanted to maybe do it in copper versus PEX. In my opinion, PEX is the wave of the future, and it is a pipe, and it's what's in my home. And if I built a new home, it would be in PEX, not copper. Think about trying to get copper up to a 3rd-story fixture, and bathrooms that are on the way up to on the 2nd floor all the way up. The demolition that would have to incur and the joints that you have to sweat on every floor going all the way through, you would be demoing 25% of a home nowadays to repipe a home in copper. Effective just as far as price and a pipe that's already been proven for 30 years, it's almost a no-brainer that all the repipes are probably the highest percentage are all PEX now. And crimping joints and walls that have insulation is a crimp tool and a crimp ring versus trying to sweat joints. And then tying into the old fixtures that are in your home as well, sweating inside behind showers and bathrooms and vanities and toilets and things like that. PEX is obviously, in my opinion, the best way to go for any repipes nowadays.
Okay. How long does it take for the plumbing side of it? Now, obviously the drywall and the paint and all that touch-up type stuff, that's going to be a little bit longer. But talk to me about, okay, cool, plumber's coming in to redo this. Day one, is it a one-day I know it depends on the size of the house, but give me 1,500 to 2,500 square foot home average. What should someone expect as far as time frame?
I would take that. Start off with, I've done hundreds of repipes, and I would say 2 to 3 days on an average size house to properly do a repipe on bigger homes. A week has probably been about the longest I've had. Mm-hmm. Back when I first started, I would put all the drywall. I would cut every single opening so I could put the drywall back.
Right, that's always a good thing.
It helps the homeowner to be able to save funding. And since you've been in the home for a few days, you know it inside and out. And I would number the pieces of drywall 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 through 30, 40. I've had as much as 100 holes cut in a home to do a whole house repipe. So a few days typically would be minimum to do a proper job.
Got it. I know it depends in size and all that stuff. And we started out talking about like it's an expensive or it can be an expensive project depending on the size of the home. And I think when people think repipes, I think for the most part they're thinking of the supply side and not necessarily the drain side. But when you go in and you say, okay, hey, we need to repipe the thing, are you telling them, from my experience, if the supply side needs to be replaced, the drain side needs to be replaced too, or do you inspect those to make sure that they are needing to be replaced?
Yeah, there's actually kind of like 5 phases actually that you can kind of deal with on a repipe. Mm-hmm. So say you've got an older home that has older cast iron and galvanized. Mm-hmm. there's everything that's above grade, and so you could do the water separate and independent and then come back and do the waste later. Most of the time the holes are in the same spot, so sometimes it makes sense to do both at the same time. Then we've got the underground and the piping underground, which most of the time is just the waste piping. And so that can be done, but that involves jackhammering up the floors and all that stuff. Then you've got so there's waste up above grade, water above grade. You've got waste below grade. Then you've got what's coming in from outside the home. And that can be all different ages as well, and different types of material. And there's some bad materials and some materials that last longer, and things that have been in use there again since the 80s, 70s, and 80s. Plastic piping on the drainage started coming into play. And I think it lasts a long time. I mean, there's usually not a lot of issues with it other than expansion and contraction and things that can happen. Roots can still cause problems. And
so it sounds like depending on how much stuff is being, like, it could get like really expensive as far as like if you're needing to replace everything, drain, supply, water coming into the house, sewer, like all of those things. Yeah. Well, sewer hopefully is going out from the house.
Hopefully.
Well, that's true.
I know what you meant. I'm just kidding. Give you a hard time. So, I mean, let's just say that, so we're not like freaking people out. If you just had one of those, let's just stick with the water, like the pressure issue, the water coming in or supplying the fixtures and stuff. If you're repiping that, is it we're starting at around, 5 to 10, 10 to 20, 30 to 40, like what kind of, range are we like looking at? Obviously you're not giving someone a bid right now, and you'd want to have a plumber come out and like bid your specific job, but like,
yeah, I think that is the key.
2 to 5
for
water.
Oh, whew, man.
Yeah.
You don't know how happy I am to hear that. I really thought you guys were going to go like 10 to 15. I was like, oh my goodness.
Yeah. Major projects can get up into that, but most commonly we see the 2 to 5 for water lines.
Oh, that's good.
Systems like that. So
cool. Whew. All right, folks, there you go.
And waste is approximately the same. Similar. Because you're basically covering the same areas, and you have to get pipe from point A to point B and replace it.
Well, I'm currently going through like a remodel at my house, like doing a family room, then we're going to move to the kitchen and like do different things. And in my experience, when you're remodeling, that's a good time to maybe add some things that you may have always wanted to add, like, not go overboard, but like if there's like, oh, I've always wanted, like for me, I wanted some extra outlets in the family room that we repainted and we're recarpeting and things. And so I took some time beforehand and I ran some extra outlets. I expanded some outlets from 1 box to 2, moved some things around, did all the, since I was going to be doing drywall touch up and patching and things that way, I went ahead and I did all that stuff. Let's talk about if you're faced with repiping, what are some of those things that you can add to enhance your plumbing system if you're going to be having the thing repiped anyway? What are some things that you might want to think about as far as like adding to your system? Does that make sense? Did I set that up right? Mm-hmm. Okay.
I would just, right off the top of my head, was putting in a hose faucet where you want it. If you need to add another hose faucet on another side of the house, where
are you talking outside, like a hose bib?
Yeah,
that's a good one.
But I mean, that starts from the inside and goes
sure,
out,
yeah,
and things. So I mean, that's if you're frustrated with how low or how high one is, that you can't reach down to get it, or
something that might not be for everyone, but that I did was added hot water to my outside fixture. So that was to my hose bib.
Yeah, I did that on my home when I remodeled as well. It's nice to be able to wash the cars with warm water.
Mm-hmm. Well, and soft water. I was doing crawfish boils at the time, and I was like, man, it'd be nice to not have to like spend so much time heating the water up. Let me start with hot water and then boil it from there. So cooking outside, that was nice. Yes.
Ice maker line.
Ooh, an ice maker line, like going to your fridge?
Yep. Or for future, if you got an old fridge and you're thinking about down the road, you're going to replace that appliance.
I like how you said thinking about the future, because maybe that like, in the next 12 months or whatever, I'm going to be, remodeling the kitchen or getting new appliances. And that has been something when I before I finished my basement, I had open, floor joists downstairs, and I just have like a 2-story little house. And so one of the things that I did was I ran a line off of my, RO system to my ice maker. So it was like filtered and that was, I've liked doing that. So,
several years ago, before I remodeled, I went to a Parade of Homes show, and all these homes had that faucet over the stove. Yeah. I just thought, how cool is that? Because in our home, the stove was on one side of the kitchen and the faucet was on the other, and you always had to carry the pans back and forth. And so I asked my wife, I'm like, hey, do you want me to, while we're doing this, put a pot, it's called a pot filler faucet in? No, we wouldn't need it. We don't need it and stuff. We hadn't used it. And once I put it in, I tell you what, it got used and used and used. And then we sold that home, moved to a new home. And she
ain't got a pot filler no more.
Oh, I wonder if we could get a pot filler. Well, I do have plumbing right there behind. And
sure.
so that'll end up on there. But it was something where, no, don't worry about it. It's just an extra expense we don't need. But once she had it, it was like, ooh, this is nice.
Nice. I've thought about that because I'm going to be doing a kitchen remodel, and I'm in the same position that your wife is in right now, because I'm like, well, I carry the pot right now. Like, do I really need a faucet over the stove? And you're saying your wife loves it, huh?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. What else? What are some other things that if you're going to be doing this?
I would say soft water is a big one for me. If you're repiping things, make sure your system's set up. Even if you currently don't have one or don't plan on having one, rough plumb for soft water.
Gotcha.
One thing that here in Utah, people have unfinished basements.
Yes.
And that would be one thing I would definitely say, that even if you don't add much downstairs before you finish off your basements and all the bedrooms and everything, get that repiped for a water softener loop. It is so much easier to get that to happen in the mechanical room than it is to have to come back and tear open all the drywall or a bunch of drywall.
Sure. Another thing that has, I would say, over the last 10 years or so, that's like been becoming more popular are more shower heads in the shower, bigger, rain heads that come down. Like what, I've thought that we talk about like, okay, opening more faucets and the pressure's still there, but the volume is not there to be able to feed all those fixtures. And you can't just put more fixtures in without either running more lines or upsizing.
Bigger pipe. Yeah. There's some of those systems that you see, the Hansgrohe systems, where there's multiple heads and jets and sprays and everything else, and that they've got drawings that show how to pipe those things, and you need 1-inch water coming in, and typically we run 1/2 inch to a shower. And so trying to upgrade just that area without bringing the infrastructure in or that larger piping to get the volume needed, because a 1/2 inch pipe will only give you X amount of gallons per minute depending upon the pressure.
So
but it is really nice to have those. I mean, that is something that when people are remodeling.
While we're in the bathroom also, how many times do you flush the toilet and the water goes cold in the shower?
What causes that?
when as a builders, and they have subcontractors that come out, they tend to tie all the lines in for the bathroom into the mains that just go down, and it's
meaning you got one line feeding, and then they tap off
for the vanity, the toilet, the shower, et cetera. When you run in the toilet, you can run a designated line that doesn't directly tie into the shower and in the other lines in the bathroom.
So if you've got that issue and you're gonna like repipe, that's a good way to fix that issue.
Very inexpensive when you're doing your remodel and everything's open.
That, and then commonly it's just an older style valve that's not a pressure balance valve, versus the newer ones since the 90s that are pressure balanced, and it's called a scald guard feature, and they it fluctuates, and there's a little piston that moves back and forth that keeps it a little more stable.
Gotcha. Is there anything else you want to tell people about repipes, or any questions that you think people might have that you'd want to, give them some information on? Or did we cover kind of the basics?
The housing market right now here in Utah is just kind of going crazy, and there's a lot of homes for sale, and it's it's very active right now.
Sure.
And homes that have the older piping, you're either buying it as is, knowing that you're going to possibly have to update things. There again, like Scott said, most people wait until it is no longer functioning until they do that. But it's definitely something that you can look at. Has it been repiped? And how many of those 5 different areas have been repiped? Has it been the water above grade, the waste above grade? Has the concrete been redone underneath the concrete and then outside the house? And because there again, when you're looking at a home that's built in the 40s and 50s and it hasn't been upgraded, you're on borrowed time.
My house was built in the 30s. And when we got it, that was one of the things that I liked. They had gone through and rewired it. They had gone through and repiped it. And it's a old house, but like it feels like there's nothing wrong with it. Because I've got a tankless in. I got nice PEX, lines. I got Romex running through the thing. They took out the knob and tubing. What?
With an old sink.
The sink isn't from the 30s, but I went cheap. I went budget sink. When I remodel the kitchen, Ricky, our next episode is going to be like, you're remodeling a kitchen. What are the things that you need to do to get it ready? How's that?
I'm in.
Does that work?
Yes.
And I will have you come and tell me what sink to get.
When you said you purchased and they had redone all those things, was that underground all the way out to the city and everything? Your sewer and water?
I don't know if they redid it when they redid all those other things, but I have since cameraed the drainage line. Now there is a big, huge galvanized, like the elbow thing that goes in, but all of the drains feeding into it are not. And when we send the pipe, or when we send the sewer camera out the sewer line, it's the black plastic, like it's new. And so there I was expecting like big issues because I got big mature trees in the house, and no, it's
that's a huge deal when buying a home, when you have all those things done. That's invaluable.
Now, you guys didn't even like comment on the fact that like there's nothing on the table and everything has been moved to the shelves.
I didn't want to be the first. I thought Scott would jump on that.
Oh, we did before.
Don't jump. Like the shelves are not that sturdy.
Before you guys came in.
Did you?
We admired it.
Yeah, very
Looks
much.
dope, doesn't it?
So dope.
Who did that?
Me and Cam hung the shelves, and then I put the things up there. And after the fact, and this might get you now every time you walk in, I don't know why, but I put the HVAC stuff over there by the water heater, and and all the plumbing stuff over here next to these. But now I tell people it's, yin yang. You got some plumbing and some HVAC stuff over there. You got HVAC and plumbing stuff over here. I don't want to segregate too much, but
actually you did a really good job. From when we first started with just like a couple sawhorses and a piece of plywood around here, now you got a full studio built.
Baby steps.
Yeah.
For all you guys that are thinking about starting a show, you don't have to have everything all perfect all at once.
Just got to start.
Just got to start. That's what it is. And that's the show today. Thanks for tuning in. We'll be back next Tuesday with a new episode of In the House. I'd like to thank everyone, all of my guests, for being here and chiming in and sharing your expertise. If you haven't subscribed to the podcast yet, do us a favor and do that. And if you have nice things to say about us, leave us a review. If you got mean things to say, don't say them. I don't need that negative energy. And I'm sensitive. My feelings get hurt real easy. Anyway, if you'd like to know more about Any Hour Services, visit anyhourservices.com. I've been your host, Mike Wilson, and you've been listening to In the House.
Thank you, Mike.
You're welcome.